Food, production, transportation, and consumption habits have an immense impact on health, biodiversity, and the climate. Which food we buy and eat has direct consequences on the risks to develop metabolic and cardiovascular diseases. The use of land, water, fertilizers, and pesticides. And prices are the main driver for our decisions at the grocery store. But, just as we discussed in the context of mobility and industry as a whole in earlier episodes, the true costs that arise from damage done to the environment by unsustainable practices aren't included in the price we pay at the grocery store. Instead, these costs are hidden in taxes when the government pays for the damages, or accumulate as debt to be paid by the coming generations. Scientists for Future organize science communication, fact-checking, and consulting for policymakers, and they critique the policies that are being implemented. It is a model organization for scientists playing a role in society. This episode is part of a series that features members of Science for Future. We learn about their scientific background, their motivation, their activism, and their vision. In this episode, we talk about strategies to nudge the public to change their eating habits and which changes our globalized food production and supply chain should undergo. Thank you to my supporters on Patreon. Your contribution is of great help. I'm your host, Dennis Eckmeyer, and you're listening to episode 56 of Science for Societal Progress.
My name is Gesa Maschkowski. My background is nutritionist. I'm working as science editor. So I always worked between science and real people. And the last 10 years I did research in my PhD at university about behavior change and societal change. I'm also an activist, so this is the third part of mine. I'm kind of experimenting with change. I'm part of a group who founded here in Bonn the Transition Initiative Bonn im Wandel. And this is our kind of laboratory, future laboratory, where we explore how to change with real people in real settings. We do this since 8 years now, and it's a very interesting and exciting project.
What kind of change are we talking about?
Change always happens. And what we see is that change and transformation in the last about 150 or 200 years brought us into a direction which is quite risky, and not only for us but for other beings. So the question is, how can we steer change or transformation in a way that preserves and regenerates the resources we are living from?
Was that your PhD thesis?
My PhD started at another point. So I've been working since, I think, 20 or more years in the area of journalism and nutrition communication in an administration, which is now the Federal Center of Nutrition. And I noticed that all this communication and information work does not lead to the success we want. So within these 25 years, people became even more confused or got more overweight, and the food system got even more unsustainable. So I went back to university and wanted to reflect on that. I started with the question, how can nutrition communication help and support change? And I ended up with food system transformation, because nutrition communication is only one little tiny aspect of food system transformation. It can help, but it is worthless without the system transforming as well.
What exactly do you mean with the food system? The production?
The food system is all we do to produce, to deliver, to eat food, the entire system of production and the entire production chain. And this production chain is completely out of balance. The food system is contributing to a large point to all these, the transgression of planetary boundaries, which is land, which is nitrogen cycle, which is climate, which is water, which is biodiversity. And so this is what this entire system of food production is causing, food production and trade, and now we need to rethink the entire system. Fortunately, there's wonderful science and research about it. Maybe I would start with a paradigm shift. So in the former days, I say maybe in the 60s or 70s, so there was this approach of educating people to eat better. So it's a push approach to tell the people what they need to do to behave in a good, healthy, and sustainable way. And this approach was not successful. So the change which occurred was that we need to lower the barriers for healthy and sustainable health behavior. So it's a pull approach. And this approach, of course, means that we need to tackle different societal levels, from the individual to the community, to the education system, to the food production system, to the political system, and even the worldviews. All this has to go together, to come together, to enable the change towards the direction we want and need. And the interesting point is that there's also already research out there who showed that this food system transformation is possible. I felt like, when I did my PhD, I felt like a little bit like a truffle pig who were looking for these scientific truffles. And one of the truffles I found was a publication from 1985 from a Finnish and American research group who published about food system transformation in Finland. So they started a process in the 1970s because Finland has a very high cardiovascular disease mortality rate. They started this multi-level approach informed by the best theories from that area, from that time. And they ended up with a radical reduction of cardiovascular disease mortality rate by this multi-level community-based approach. So we already have the knowledge how to govern a good transformation. So went into every community of Finland and first analyzed the situation there. So how can we improve preventive services? How can we help people identify their own risk? Then, of course, they did some informations about relationship between behavior and health, but also they offered trainings and they offered social support and they did in parallel environmental changes. So they made, for example, big parties for health and invited all these different local communities to contribute. And they also implemented political measures like labeling, lowering fat in food. Also, they stopped marketing. It was a multi-level approach which went in parallel, and they did not only educate the people, they did everything they could do to support this behavior change. And this was very, very successful.
Do we already know where this is going? How should we approach this?
We need to make healthy foods and sustainable foods more available. If you look around into the supermarkets and you look for regional and maybe organic food, it's still the minor part. So even if people would start change tomorrow to eat completely healthy and organically, we could not offer this. The food is not out there. So we would need to change production practices, for example. Meanwhile, we have a very, very good review, which is called the Planetary Health Diet. It was developed by the Eat Lancet Commission. And they also developed these recommendations, which are very, very close to the general recommendations. But also they said, what we need now is to make the healthy food from sustainable food system normal. This is what we need to do. And it's not normal to get healthy food from a sustainable food system. This is crazy, but this is the reality.
What would sustainable food production look like?
Sustainable food production would mean that we lower the input of means like fertilizers, that we produce with higher biodiversity at our fields, that we use these techniques to sequestrate carbon via composting and mulching, that we have farms adapted to the region. So that means we have less animals and we have more, for example, pulses. So to produce in a sustainable way would mean we would produce much more vegetables and fruits. We would produce much more pulses. We would produce much more nuts. And then we would be able to eat it. But at the moment, we have too much animals. We have too much fertilizers. We have, for example, in the north, in the global north, we have this extreme loss of biodiversity in Asia. We have too much land use. So this is not sustainable, and this is well defined through the concept of planetary boundaries. We exactly know, or not exactly, but with a high certainty, we know how our system transgresses these natural borders. And this is the thing we have to reshape now, to start producing food within the planetary boundaries.
So we're supposed to stay within the boundaries of what the planet can sustain. But these boundaries are affected by climate change, right?
Sure, and the great thing is that food can make a big contribution to climate change mitigation and adaptation. So food is one of the largest driver to greenhouse gas emissions. It's about the entire food system is estimated to contribute between 25 and even 37 something to the greenhouse gas emissions. But when we use these regenerative practices, this agroecology, so we can even use the food production system as a sink for greenhouse gases. So we can bind greenhouse gases via compost in the earth again. We will fail to reach the Paris Agreement if we don't use the sink.
What are the sources for carbon emissions in the food system?
Yeah, so carbon is emitted at every stage of the entire food processing chain. So it's emitted at the very first stage of the food production, so at the agriculture, because if we need fertilizers, they need oil to be produced. So you can think about 1 kilo of nitrogen is produced via 2 kilos of oil. This is one source of carbon emissions, and then the entire chain from processing, transporting, cooling, bringing it home, cooking, all that is contributing to the greenhouse gas emissions. And at every stage, we can make it differently. So we know also from science that today we need about 4 fossil fuel calories to produce 1 calorie of food, which is really very inefficient in terms of using fossil fuels. And in the 60s, it was the opposite way. So we needed 1 calorie of fossil fuels to produce about 6 calories of food. And this has to change. Yeah, this is really this is what happened between 1960 and today. And now we have to turn around again to use less fossil fuels, which is equivalent to carbon emissions, and to enhance the productivity via mixed cultures and all these techniques that are provided by agroecology. We need to relocalize. So there are also calculations, for example, if you produce only 20% of the daily food basket for a town of about 300,000 inhabitants, which is comparable to Bonn, you would reduce transport kilometers in a size of 16 million transport kilometers per year. So it's worth the effort to relocalize. That does not mean that we don't need a world trade anymore. We will need world trade, but only for food which needs to be transported.
Social justice is a big issue when we talk about societal transformations. During the pandemic, the public in Germany became aware of the many migrant workers that are exploited in meat processing factories and for the harvest on the field. If we ended this exploitation and at the same time produced more food locally in a high-wage country like Germany, possibly using even more labor-intensive methods, would food still be affordable?
Thank you very much for this very interesting question. We need to talk about prices. So what is the real price for food? And the real price for food now in the supermarkets is low because we exploit people with low wages, because we use nature without paying it. So these are not true prices. And we have a wonderful research field, which is the true cost accounting. And they started in the 70s with calculating the true costs of nitrogen use. And now they are so advanced that they can say, okay, if you buy an organic apple or if you buy a conventional apple, the total costs for the organic apple is less than the costs for the conventional apple, because the entire costs for producing it, the pesticide residues, the transportation and all that is not reflected in the price. We can't change, and this is very, very clear, and this is also a conclusion of the Planetary Health Report, we can't change the system which is playing with wrong rules. The rule at the moment is that everything which is needed from nature is for free, and everything which is needed as work costs a lot, social costs and all that. It's these wages and taxes. So if we want to turn, we need to make the use of nature, we need to pay for it, and we need to lower, for example, the taxes for work maybe. But the tax system at the moment forces producers, if they want or not, they forces producers to use nature and exploit people. These are the wrong rules. Can people with low wages afford this food? And I would like to tell a little story of a city in Brazil. It's Belo Horizonte. Belo Horizonte was awarded by the World Future Council for this innovative food policy. They had this problem with hunger, and the mayor wanted that no child would get to bed hungry anymore. So he implemented several laws and several strategies. For example, he offered free school meal for all school children, and he opened the city for farmers markets. He offered the farmers land around the city to work on and to produce food. He implemented community kitchens where everybody can go and get healthy food from sustainable production for a very low price. And all these measures were about 3% of the entire budget of the city. So I wonder why we always talk about how expensive good food is. There's something wrong with our perception. Here in Germany, we are one of the richest countries of the world, and we always talk about how expensive good food is. Something is wrong here. We use 11% of our income for food, and in the 50s it was about 50%. So where's all the money gone? Of course, into the rents, but also in lots of other stuff we probably not necessarily need.
The consumption of goods we don't actually need is a whole additional topic involving, for example, the abominable fast fashion industry or the habit of treating shopping as a sort of hobby in itself. But this is not the topic this time. Instead, let's talk about Gesa's activism as a member of Scientists for Future.
I joined Scientists for Future because of at least two reasons. The first one was really that I found it was the time really to talk about the problems and to build up a good community for transformation. On the other hand, I saw, my perception is that Scientists for Futures, lots of scientists still come from natural sciences, and they are not aware of these transformative approaches. So I see a need for exchange and for learning from each other, for transdisciplinary working, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So transformation already happened, as I said before, but not every scientist is aware of this. So we need to talk between the people who did human health research and all the people of the sustainability research area and use the knowledge.
Previous guests from Scientists for Future on this podcast pointed out the positive aspects of collaborating across fields, but also acknowledged difficulties. Which difficulties did Gesa identify working with experts from different fields?
Yeah, it's a question. I would say they don't only come from different fields, they have different worldviews. And one still very predominant worldview is that I'm the expert and I need to talk to lay people who have to learn from me. And this does not work. So this dominant hierarchical communication approach is not working. And that's where we need to exchange our worldviews. Is the human being a being which needs to be corrected? Or is a human being a being which is keen to do positive things? And depending on that, the entire communication changes.
In science communication circles, I've heard this being referred to as the deficit model.
Yeah. So the standard in communication or in maybe in health behavior change it's called the golden standard, the approach which tackles different societal levels at the same time to produce coherent experiences. And what I also see is that we urgently need that's what we call mastery experiences. So areas where people make first steps and have success with change. So we talk and talk and talk, but where can I do something and motivate people for change, and where they can really start making good experiences with change. So that's what we urgently need.
So in the preparation for this podcast, Gesa pointed out that she had some great news about her project with the Scientists for Future just before the interview. So what happened?
Yeah, so this came from our work here as a Transition Town Initiative Bonn im Wandel.
Bonn used to be the capital of the German Federal Republic when Germany was divided into two countries. After the German unification, the federal government was moved to Berlin.
We have done a lot of projects within the last years, like setting up a community-supported agriculture project, setting up repair cafes, starting cargo bike projects. And we noticed that if you provide a room and if you facilitate support processes, change processes, people change. And this is what's urgently needed now. So the city of Bonn decided to become carbon neutral latest in 2035. And this means that we start a huge transformation journey. And the question is, how can we guide this journey? And who is there to guide it? And that was the idea. We had the idea to start to kind of invent or create a huge participatory process for the city, where we create forums, different kind of forums where people can meet, scientists can meet, entrepreneurs can meet, to talk about the challenges and the approaches. And this concept is called Bonn for Future, V for the climate. And we started it with a question. The question was, what has to happen that this transformation process is a very good one? And we asked this question to lots of people, for example, to politicians, to initiatives, to facilitators, and also to people in the administration. And what came out of it was this concept we now presented. And the good and the interesting thing is that the city administration support this concept and worked together with us. So we are now at the stage that we could present the concept for a big participatory process towards transformation in Bonn to the politics. And we kind of succeeded in getting through the first assemblies. And in September, the Council of Bonn will decide if they finance and also support the process.
How exactly is the project structured?
The concept consists of different project blocks, and one is forums, climate forums, we call it climate forums, and one is a communication strategy, and one is networking, so connecting the actors and working jointly towards this transformatory approach. One piece of the concept is to go into the different areas of the city and the neighborhoods and to talk there with the people. So it consists of several parts, and forums is one of them, that we need these opportunities to really talk and exchange and inspire each other.
That's exciting. And now, as I'm preparing the episode for release, the decision was made. In an update email, Gesa informed me that the funds were approved. The City Council voted to support climate action with a large majority. All the major parties voted in favor, which is a fantastic success, and they are very glad that everybody's on board with the proposal. Then a complicated legal contract had to be devised. This is the first time the city administration not only collaborates with an initiative network, but also funds it. And the review of the contract is still ongoing. Hope is that there will be no further major obstacles. So now that everything is on its way, what is Gesa's vision for a carbon-neutral city of Bonn in 2035?
I think my vision is not relevant. My vision is that lots of people develop a vision. And this is also science. We as human beings, if we think about future, we always use parts of our brain, yeah, certainly you know it, which rely to our history somehow. And if we want to imagine another kind of future, we need to kind of jump into the desired future, imagine it, and then look backward and explore what steps we need to do to go towards this desired future. This methodology is called backcasting, and it's very, very forceful. It is proven in different settings, in particular in sustainability, in the area of sustainability transformation. So I think my vision is that we can provide this positive perspective to lots of people, and that we can use the creativity and all the skills of the people to jointly steer through this transformation and to jointly create this transformation. And this is my vision.
Gesa started out with an interest in effectively helping people adopt more healthy eating habits. She found that the deficit model, merely informing citizens what would be beneficial practice, isn't sufficient to induce transformation. Instead, intensive work was necessary to include citizens in the transformation process and guide them. This is how Finland was able to get its citizens to adhere more closely to a recommended diet. Speaking of dietary recommendations, the EAT Lancet or Eat Lancet Commission published recommendations named the Planetary Health Diet. The diet is supposed to be healthy and at the same time its production sustainable. The change in diet for the average European would mainly be to exchange most of the animal products, meat, dairy, and eggs, with fruit, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, and nuts. Apparently, we also eat too many potatoes. I wouldn't have expected that you could, in fact, eat too many potatoes, except maybe in the form of chips and fries. Anyway, Gesa is part of a group that proposed a project to the city of Bonn that will put what she learned about guiding transformations into practice. The inclusive approach to take the citizens with them along the way was met with agreement by the city council, and they are now setting up the structure for the project. And this project isn't just about eating habits and agriculture. The whole city is supposed to become carbon neutral within 15 years. Gesa's vision for a carbon neutral future is not about what things will be like. Her vision is about how to get there. And for her, that means that everybody develops their own vision. And I completely agree with this. I am asking about the vision of each scientist in this series because I think that in order to develop your own vision, one needs to have an idea of what could be possible. And who is better equipped to give us an intuition than the experts?
I talked about the truffles I found, and one truffle I found was the publication of Carl Rogers from 1961. What I learned from Rogers is what a humanistic worldview does mean. And Rogers said, we can create change if we have good relationships. So the fundament of change is good relationships. And I would like to add this concerns not only our relationship to each other, it concerns also the relationship to my own views and feelings and needs, and to nature. So the most, from research, I feel the most important thing to do is to enhance and ameliorate and nourish these relationships. Rogers talked about 3 concepts. It's authenticity, so transparency about my own feelings, and it's also about acceptance of others. And the last one is the ability to see the world of others and to feel as they see it and feel it. So these are the 3 concepts which really allow real, good, nourishing relationships.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please share it with your friends. If you want to contact me with comments, questions, and suggestions, you can do so by email info@scienceforprogress.eu or on Twitter @sci4progress. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you and goodbye.